Welcome back. Today we're diving deep into human behavior with Dexter Dias's book, The 10 Types of Human.
Yeah.
And he makes this fascinating argument that, our physical bodies evolved over time.
Right.
Our minds did too, leading to these, 10 distinct personality archetypes.
Interesting.
We're going to be exploring one in particular that really caught my eye, the perceiver.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, they're like the moral compass of society,
Right.
driven by this intense need for justice and truth.
I mean, it's not just a passive observation for them either, is it?
No. It's
That's
this
just-
inner fire pushing them to act,
Yeah.
to expose wrongdoing and champion what's right.
And that's what I found really intriguing, is that he doesn't just throw out this label perceiver.
Yeah.
He really dives deep into what creates this type.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He goes way beyond just surface-level descriptions, using real-world examples and research
Yes.
to paint a really comprehensive picture.
So let's unpack that picture a little bit. What exactly makes someone a perceiver? The book talks about how they're incredibly motivated by a sense of right and wrong.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just a preference. It's core to how they operate.
Yeah, it's almost like they have this heightened sensitivity to injustice, like
Yeah.
a radar that's always scanning for what's unfair or unethical.
Interesting.
And when that radar pings, they can't just ignore it.
Right.
They have to do something.
And that doing something can take many forms, right?
Absolutely.
Because the book mentions some pretty diverse examples, like
Oh, yeah.
investigative journalists Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, who uncovered the Watergate scandal.
Exactly. Think about the risks they took, the pressure they faced. I mean, their pursuit of truth wasn't just about reporting a story. It was about challenging a corrupt system,
Right.
even if it meant going up against the most powerful person in the country.
Which really gets to the core of what makes perceivers so impactful.
Mm-hmm.
They're not just armchair philosophers.
Right.
They're willing to put themselves on the line for their beliefs.
Yeah.
And you see this throughout history with figures like Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, they dedicated their lives to fighting for equality and justice,
Yes.
facing incredible opposition and personal danger.
Right.
Their stories resonate so powerfully because they embody that perceiver spirit, unwavering commitment,
Yeah.
even when the cost is high.
It makes you wonder, though,
Mhm.
is this something they're born with?
Right?
Or is it shaped by their experiences?
Yeah.
Because the book dives into both the psychology and the sociology of perceivers.
Absolutely.
Which I found really interesting.
It's not as simple either. He suggests there's a predisposition towards certain traits,
Okay.
like high levels of moral reasoning, meaning perceivers tend to analyze situations in a very ethically driven way.
So they think things through a little more deeply.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean every highly ethical person becomes a crusading perceiver, right?
Exactly. That's
Right.
where the sociological piece comes in. Exposure to injustice, whether directly experienced or witnessed, can be a huge catalyst.
Oh.
It's like that innate sense of right and wrong gets activated,
Right.
amplified by seeing the world's flaws firsthand.
So it's like the classic nature and nurture situation,
Exactly.
but with a moral twist.
Yeah.
The potential might be there, but it takes certain experiences to really forge that perceiver fire.
I like that.
And what I find fascinating is it's not just about fighting against bad things.
Right.
Dias emphasizes that perceivers are also driven by a need to educate,
Mm-hmm.
to shine a light on issues that others might overlook or ignore.
It's true.
So it's less about being a contrarian
Right.
and more about advocating for what they believe is right, even if it's unpopular.
Precisely.
Okay.
They're almost like the ethical whistleblowers of society.
But think about how challenging that can
Oh,
be.
yeah.
You're often going up against powerful entities, ingrained systems, even apathy from those around you.
It's tough.
I imagine that can get incredibly disheartening at times. To believe so strongly in something and to constantly face resistance.
It absolutely can. But what's remarkable about perceivers is their resilience. They have this unwavering belief that change is possible,
Oh,
even when it seems incredibly distant.
wow.
And that can be incredibly inspiring to others.
It's like their own conviction gives them the strength to keep going, to
Yeah.
keep pushing for what they believe in, no matter the obstacles.
And that unwavering commitment is what allows them to make real, tangible impact on the world.
Right.
Think about the ripple effect of their actions.
Yeah.
One person speaking out can inspire others to find their voice,
Right.
to join the fight for a more just world.
That brings up an interesting question for you, dear listener. As we're exploring these characteristics, Does any of this resonate with you?
Right.
Do you feel similar pull towards justice and truth?
Maybe you see shades of the perceiver in your own life,
Hmm.
in the choices you make, the causes you care about.
Right.
Or perhaps you admire individuals who embody this archetype. It's worth pondering because understanding this drive for a better world and how it manifests in so many different ways
Hmm.
can help us all navigate our own paths a little better.
It's easy to think about these big historical figures when we talk about perceivers,
Right.
but the book also highlights something really important.
Yeah.
Perceivers exist on a spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about those grand, sweeping actions.
That's a crucial point. Dias makes it clear that we're not talking about rigid categories.
Okay.
It's not like you're either a full-blown perceiver or not at all.
Right.
There are shades of this archetype in many of us.
Right, because even those everyday acts of courage, of
Yeah.
standing up for what's right, even when it's uncomfortable,
Yeah.
those can be expressions of the perceiver within us.
Think about it this way. The same drive that motivates a whistleblower to expose corporate fraud
Okay.
might also be what pushes someone to speak up when they see a colleague being bullied
Right.
or to challenge a discriminatory policy at their workplace.
Yeah.
The scale might be different.
Right. But the underlying motivation, that sense of moral imperative, is similar.
And the book also digs into this fascinating interplay between individual psychology and the broader societal context.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about being born a certain way. Our experiences shape us too.
Absolutely. Dias uses the phrase forged in the fires of injustice.
Wow.
What he's getting at is that while someone might have a natural inclination toward fairness and ethical thinking,
Okay.
it's often the exposure to inequality, to suffering, that really ignites that perceiver passion.
So like witnessing or experiencing something profoundly unfair could be the catalyst that pushes someone from simply being a good person to actively seeking to change things.
Precisely. It's not just about knowing what's right. It's about feeling compelled to act,
Yeah.
to make things right.
Right.
And that's what separates the perceiver from someone who might have similar values,
Right.
but doesn't feel that same urgency to challenge the status quo.
Which makes me think about the professions that tend to attract perceivers.
The book mentions lawyers fighting for human rights activists, working to expose corruption,
Uh-huh.
journalists holding the powerful accountable.
It makes sense when you think about it.
Right.
These are roles where you're directly confronting injustice,
Yeah.
where your work is about bringing truth to light and advocating for those who might not have a voice.
But it's not always about these big public battles, is it?
Right.
Sometimes it's about those smaller, quieter acts of resistance,
Mm-hmm.
the everyday choices we make to align with our values.
That's such an important point. Think about the teacher who goes above and beyond to support a student facing discrimination.
Right.
Or the volunteer who dedicates their time to helping refugees, or even just someone who chooses to boycott a company with unethical practices.
It's like those choices, even though they might seem insignificant in the grand scheme of things,
Right.
they're still expressions of that perceiver spirit.
Yeah.
They're saying, I may not be able to change the whole system, but I can make a difference in my own sphere of influence.
And that brings us to something that Dias doesn't shy away from. The challenges inherent in being a perceiver.
Oh.
Because let's be honest, it's not always a smooth or easy path.
Right. In fact, it can be incredibly difficult.
Wow, yeah.
You're often facing powerful entities, ingrained systems, even
Yeah.
backlash from people who might prefer to maintain the status quo.
It's true.
It takes incredible courage and resilience to keep going in the face of that opposition.
Think about whistleblowers who risk their careers, their reputations, even their safety to expose wrongdoing,
Right.
or activists who face persecution for challenging oppressive regimes.
Oh, wow.
It's not for the faint of heart.
It makes you wonder, what is it about perceivers that allows them to persevere?
Yeah.
Because it would be so easy to just give up, to say, this is too hard. This fight is too big.
Well, Dias delves into that, suggesting it's not just about willpower.
Okay.
It's about having a deep sense of purpose, a belief that change is possible,
Wow.
even when the odds seem stacked against them.
Right.
And it's that conviction that allows them to push through the doubt, the fear, the exhaustion.
It's like they have this inner fire that fuels them, a moral compass that just won't let them look away from injustice,
Right.
even when it would be easier to do so.
And that's what makes their story so inspiring,
Yeah.
because they remind us that even amidst darkness, even when things seem hopeless,
Mm-hmm.
individuals can make a difference.
Right.
One voice can spark a movement. One act of courage can shift the balance of power.
Wow.
It's a powerful message, and it brings us back to you, the listener.
Right. Because as we're unpacking all this, it begs the question, how do you see this archetype playing out in your own life?
Yeah.
Do you see yourself as a perceiver? Or perhaps recognize these traits in someone you admire?
It's worth reflecting on because understanding the perceiver both within ourselves and in others can help us navigate the complexities of the world
Right.
and perhaps inspire us to tap into that inner drive for a more just and truthful existence.
You know, as we've been diving up into this whole perceiver archetype,
Yeah.
I've been thinking about how easy it is to get caught up in the big picture,
Right. Yeah.
systemic change or fighting massive injustices.
It's almost like we romanticize those grand gestures,
Right.
the heroic figures taking on these seemingly impossible challenges.
But Dias really brings it back to something much more personal,
Right.
which I think is crucial for understanding the true essence of the perceiver.
Mm-hmm.
He says it's not just about these huge acts, it's about how we choose to live our lives.
Yeah.
The values we embody in our daily interactions.
He uses this phrase, the everyday perceiver.
Oh, I like that.
These are the people who may never make headlines, but are quietly working to make their little corner of the world a little bit better.
It's like that ripple effect we talked about earlier.
Exactly.
Imagine if each of us embraced even a small piece of that perceiver spirit.
Yeah.
How much could that collectively add up to?
It's incredible when you think about it that way.
Right.
Think about the parent who advocates for their child with a learning disability, or the neighbor who stands up to someone making racist comments,
Uh-huh.
or even that person who always makes a point of supporting local businesses with ethical practices.
It's not about waiting for some perfect moment to become a perceiver.
Right.
It's about recognizing those opportunities in our everyday lives to act on our values,
Yeah.
to stand up for what we believe is right, even in seemingly mundane situations.
I think that's a really powerful point.
And that brings us to perhaps the most important takeaway from this whole deep dive.
Okay.
Understanding the perceiver isn't just about identifying a personality type.
Right.
It's about recognizing a potential within each of us.
It's about acknowledging that we all have this capacity for moral reasoning,
Yes.
for empathy, for taking action when we see something that needs to be changed.
So it's less about labeling ourselves or others.
Right.
And more about acknowledging that we all have that inner compass.
Yeah, we all have that inner compass.
Even if it's a little rusty sometimes.
Even if it's a little rusty sometimes.
Yeah.
And the more we learn about the perceiver, the more we can actively choose to cultivate those qualities within ourselves.
Which is what I find so inspiring,
Mm-hmm.
because it means we're not just passive bystanders in the face of injustice.
Right.
We have the power to choose how we respond,
Yeah.
to make choices that align with our deepest sense of what's right.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of perceivers,
Yes.
I encourage you to reflect on this. How can you embody that perceiver spirit in your own life,
Right.
even in small, everyday ways?
Perhaps it's speaking up when you witness prejudice,
Mm-hmm.
or volunteering your time to a cause you believe in,
Yeah.
or simply being more mindful of the ethical implications of your choices.
Those are all great examples.
Because even those seemingly small actions can create a ripple effect,
Absolutely.
leading to a more just truthful and compassionate world for all of us.
And if you're intrigued by this whole idea of human archetypes
Okay.
and the complexities of human behavior,
Right.
I highly recommend exploring the other 9 types outlined in Dias's book, The 10 Types of Human.
Yes, it's a great book.
It's a fascinating and thought-provoking journey that will leave you with a deeper understanding of yourself and the world around you.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Absolutely.
Until next time, remember, your voice matters, your actions matter, and even small steps can lead to meaningful change.